You know, pal, a tank is a mighty weapon, but in many ways, it's only as strong as the man who commands it. I tried, right? Come on, okay, fine. Steel Commander. Oh, we have to do that again. Amiens, August 8, 1918, the Black Day of the German Army. 530 British tanks were secretly assembled on a 13-mile front and unleashed without the usual preliminary artillery barrage. Surprise was total. A wave of heavy armor, almost impenetrable to bullets and grenades, broke into the German lines, achieving major breakthroughs for the first time in years. Heavy casualties and an overall panic routed the powerless German infantry. What would follow was blow after blow of armored fists, heralding the beginning of the end of the Great War. Less than 2 years after the tank's combat debut at Flers-Courcelette during the Battle of the Somme, the technological leap was immense. Back in 1916, the early Mark I tanks were pretty restricted in their effectiveness. They were too few in numbers, too dispersed, and plagued by technical issues. Nonetheless, what had been achieved by just months of planning and engineering, the gathering of armor plates, naval guns, tractor tracks, engines, and transmission systems, was nothing short of the weapon that would change warfare for the coming century. At Amiens, the British Tank Corps was freshly equipped with the new Mark Vs, a new benchmark in tank design. Still comparatively slow, and with a short operating range of movement, yet with a more powerful engine and an epicyclic gear steering system that allowed for just one driver, and more sophistication helped eliminate the hellish conditions inside the tanks and ensure the overall survivability of its crews. Just 3 weeks before Amiens, the French had staged their own large-scale tank offensive. More than 400 French Schneider, Charmont, and Renault tanks had been sent into action. The light but agile Renault FT tank was yet another influential design. It was the first tank with its armament mounted inside a rotating armored turret. The driver was situated at the front of the hull, the engine compartment was separated from the rest of the crew, and the track was on sprockets at the rear. Outfitted with a short-barreled 37mm cannon, it could fire the whole range of ammunition, from armor-piercing shells to canister shot and high-explosive rounds. Both the Mark V and the Renault FT would set the standard for modern tanks. Winston Churchill called them the chariots of war, instruments of modern science and precision.
Over 100 years ago, since we first rode into fire, the rulers of the battlefield, rolling over trench and wire.
The armistice at the end of the Great War hit the brakes for tank production and new tank designs. Plans had already been made for a huge offensive in 1919, though, calling for thousands of tanks to be unleashed at once all over the Western Front. Yet what followed in the interwar years was not just a drastic reduction of the existing tank force, but also a big slowdown of innovation. The Anglo-American-French cooperation that was to produce more than 1,200 new heavy tanks was scrapped, and funding for new prototypes and experiments was withdrawn. Critics then came forward asking not only about how to use tanks in the future, but if they should use them at all. Traditionalists saw tanks more as a freakish byproduct of trench warfare, something that was already out of date. It was argued that large tank formations could never again achieve large-scale surprise and would instead inevitably run into prepared rows of artillery and anti-tank defenses, and even those in favor of tanks wanted to use them more like mobile shields or gun platforms that advanced with the infantry into battle. Only a handful of influential men thought beyond this. Visionaries like Jean-Baptiste Estienne, Heinz Guderian, or JFC Fuller advocated for large and independent armored armies not tied to the infantry's slow pace. Captain Dwight Eisenhower predicted the need to think ahead. In making local counterattacks, the tank has already proven its worth, and the new tank will greatly increase the opportunities and effect of such actions. The clumsy, awkward and snail-like progress of the old tanks must be forgotten, and in their place, we must picture this speedy, reliable, and efficient engine of destruction. Eisenhower's words, however, fell mostly on deaf ears. France, which had the largest armored force on the planet at the end of the Great War, put tanks in an auxiliary role with the infantry. The US abolished the independence of its tank corps altogether. Only Britain, establishing its Royal Tank Corps in 1923, began looking into the establishment of an experimental mechanized force, but not a whole lot came out of it. And yet, on the one hand, the military planners of the interwar years were hindered by static doctrines, unable to break away from infantry support. But on the other hand, this indecisiveness allowed for really ambitious ideas. The super heavy French Char 2C tank sported a second turret at the rear. The British A1 Independent had 4 additional machine gun turrets. The Soviet T-35 was to have 5 turrets because why not? I mean, who knew what would work? Should they use light tanks and fast tankettes or heavy multi-barreled monsters with impenetrable armor? But though the Western Entente hesitated, both the Red Army and the Wehrmacht were eager to keep up with new developments, to the point of secretly cooperating with each other. The mobility of tanks and armored vehicles fit especially well with the German doctrines of mobility. With the help of the combustion engine, the Wehrmacht could maybe achieve what was not previously possible with horses and marching feet. By the 1930s, tanks had become more maneuverable and controllable, with higher engine power and the increasing use of radio. This made the military experts surrounding Guderian think beyond simply using them as battering rams. Their speed would assure their surprise, and through surprise, they would achieve victory. The layman, when thinking of a tank attack, tends to envisage the steel monsters of Cambrai and Amiens. He thinks of vast wire entanglements being crushed like so much straw. He remembers how the tanks crashed through dugouts, smashing machine guns to splinters between their weight. He recalls the terror that they inspired as they plowed through the battlefield, flames darting from their exhaust pipes, and how this tank terror was described as the cause of our collapse on the 8th of August. Such steamroller tactics are one, though not the most important, of the things tanks can do. The German advance into Poland in September 1939 was spearheaded by over 2,600 tanks. This large number of mostly light tanks, in close support with dive bombers and artillery, swarmed in rapid and well-coordinated maneuvers through the Polish lines, creating chaos and confusion in the rear. When the Wehrmacht turned west, they concentrated their panzer divisions into even larger panzer groups and panzer corps. Tanks crossed the Ardennes and the Meuse in record time, outmaneuvering the in many ways superior French Char B1 and Saumur tanks in an armored rush that became feared as Blitzkrieg. When the Wehrmacht's mighty panzer armies eventually turned eastwards again in 1941 into the Soviet Union, they initially enjoyed tremendous success. It was still pretty much the same force that had been fielded against France, and it caught the Red Army by surprise, outmaneuvering and encircling millions of troops. The Soviet Union's tank force had been caught in transition, right? See, when the Red Army had fought Finland over the winter of 1939 and 40, the Winter War, their thousands of tanks failed to secure victory against an opponent who basically had none. A large portion of their T-26 and T-28s were destroyed by effective Finnish anti-tank tactics. With the German Panzer Corps wreaking havoc in the west, Joseph Stalin wanted the Red Army to be equipped with an equally large tank force, but this decision came too late. However, to the Wehrmacht's surprise, they encountered a bunch of superior tanks. The Soviet T-34 was an excellent, if crude, tank at the time. The heavy KV-1 was immune to nearly all German anti-tank guns, as was the KV-2 with its 152mm howitzer. In 1942, a new phase of tank warfare began. The first half of the Second World War was fought by tanks that had mainly already been built, with some upgrades and improvements, okay. But by now, all nations went back to the drawing board. putting the bitter experience of what worked and what didn't work into new designs. Questions once more revolved around the three key components of tank design: armor, mobility, and firepower. They had to consider barrel length, recoil and sighting systems, loading speed, as well as shell and fuel carrying capacity. Should they carry more high explosive or more armor piercing shells? Use gasoline or diesel? Numbers or quality? With the US entering the war, its industrial might was brought in. The new M4 Sherman tanks appeared just in time for the Second Battle of El Alamein. With its 75mm short barrel gun, the versatile tank made a difference over the hot sands of North Africa. The British as well, after losing the majority of their outdated Matilda tanks in the duels of the desert, introduced the Cromwell, the first all-purpose cruiser tank. All contributed to the eventual defeat of the German Afrika Korps. In the east, the age of Blitzkrieg had ended as well. The armored stalemate at Kursk in July 1943 proved that the Soviet Union had caught up in mass-producing their T-34. There, on the battlefield of Prokhorovka, where an elite SS Panzer Corps was engaged by hundreds of Soviet tanks and self-propelled guns, the German initiative was finally permanently broken. Increasingly, the tank war became one of attrition, a war which the Wehrmacht could not hope to win. Trying to stem the tide, they upgraded their arsenal as well. Their new Tiger and Panther tanks could fire powerful shells from high-performance barrels, penetrating thick armor over long distances. But despite the Tiger's excellent optics and armor, they were technically flawed, with unreliable transmissions and underpowered engines. And worst of all, they were expensive. A tank like the well-rounded but simplistic Russian T-34 could be produced en masse, and the American Sherman tank was cheaper by the dozen. Facing the Allied invasion in Normandy in June 1944 and the Red Army's unstoppable advance in the east, the Wehrmacht was not that far away from another Black Day. And what would follow was blow after blow of armored fists, heralding the beginning of the end of the Second World War. The War of Tanks was decided where it began, with the blueprints and designers and manufacturers. From the first engagement at the Somme in 1916 to the great armored battles at the gates of Berlin in 1945, tank design had taken a huge leap forward. In 1939, no one really knew what a future tank war would look like, and many expected it just to be Great War II trench war boogaloo. And so when the Second World War began, the nations fielded a variety of tank designs, a mix of light, medium, and heavy tanks with often conflicting doctrines. By the end of the Second World War, however, the Soviet IS-2, the German Panther, the American Pershing, and the British Comet all shared a similar design. Their silhouettes were low, their tracks wide, and their armor sloped. Turrets were cast and were equipped with long, high-velocity barrels. Would the fundamental design change as the Cold War began? What was the post-World War II future of the tank? Well, perhaps one day we'll answer those questions right here.
So, Indy,
Yeah.
what happened to your nose before we start anything else?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. But you know what's even more interesting? You tell me, what happened to my nose, Per? What happened to my nose?
All right. So we were out driving our tank.
Aha.
And we were driving very fast.
Ooh.
And then we were driving through a wall.
Ah.
And that was all fine.
Oh, okay.
And
yeah.
then we just parked the tank.
Yeah?
We climbed out. We were fine.
I'm okay?
Yeah, you were fine at this time.
Yeah.
But then, just as we exit the tank.
Yeah?
Yeah, and I walked this way, you walked that way.
Okay.
And that way there was you just walked straight into a tree.
I walked into a tree.
Yeah.
That's what happened to my nose.
Yeah. But you survived the tank crash.
I crashed the tank. No, I was fine. Were you fine?
I was completely fine all the time.
Pirate was completely fine all the time, and I was maybe I'm just that kind of guy that walks into. I walked into a tree, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Steel Commander, this song has a long story, right?
Yeah, it's a very long story. The song has been in the creation for so long time. Actually, when we met a long time ago, I don't remember which song we did, but we did a couple of episodes which we filmed in Minsk.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, that was March 2020.
Yeah,
just
before
started,
the
yeah.
Corona started, and everything got a little bit complicated, so we couldn't film in Munich.
Right.
And I was in Minsk working on a secret song, The Steel Commanders.
And you were working with World of Tanks.
Yes,
right?
Correct. So it's been in the secret work for a year and a half now.
Wow.
Until we're sitting here. Unfortunately, it was a long story, but it's maybe it's even better when it finally comes out and everybody can share it. It's not just, a song and stuff. It's so much more to this because there is a game called World of Tanks.
Yeah.
And these guys, we collaborated with them on a couple of things. People might remember the Bismarck, which is the same company, but not the World of Tanks.
Right.
But all in all, when we decided upon creating this, let's say, song together with them, it was not only as a music video this time, it was with a complete setup. There was a Sabaton tank called the Primo Victoria. And this one was released some years ago.
Okay.
And it was really fun.
Yeah.
Now, the technique is a little bit updated.
Yeah.
And now we are releasing a new tank in the game called the Spirit of War.
The Spirit of War.
Yeah, that's the new Sabaton tank.
Okay.
And inside of it is all the band members.
Yeah. Animated. Cool.
As crew members.
Yeah.
So we have our own tank again inside of the game.
And for the animation, did they have voices? Did you guys do voices for it?
Yeah.
So, but do they all sound like you, or is it like in 70s anime where there'd be like the dumb guy and there'd be like one of you guys has to be the dumb guy?
No. We can listen to a few of them.
Okay.
Steel Commanders, let's battle. Bring the heat. Got him! That was easy.
Oh, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I want to be one of the tank guys. Damn it. Okay.
And you can play as the Sabaton band members in there.
That's really cool.
Yep.
Now, I'd never been to Minsk before we went to Minsk there. And you told me, you said, man, you're going to love Minsk.
Yeah.
And, all I knew about it was, a fair about the government, which is not going to thrill you, But you were right. Minsk was, what an amazing, amazing place, man.
Yeah. Maybe someday we can come back.
I would love to go back there. Yeah. And it was very cool. The World of Tanks, actually, because we didn't know where we were going to film. I think we did 5 episodes, something like that.
We did something like that.
But World of Tanks gave us free. Now, let's use their studio for free to do that stuff, which was very cool. So thanks, World of Tanks. That rhymed, hey? Oh, I should just ended it there. Tanks, World of Tanks. Tanks, but no tanks. But tanks, but it's no tanks, not like no thanks, but it's tanks. Do we have anything else to say about Steel Commander? You got to say it really tough.
It's just all about tanks. That's what it is.
Even if you're in conversation, when you get to the word Steel Commander, you have to say it like that. That's very important, because otherwise you don't. You see what I mean? You don't give it the emphasis. Oh, this is Jason, and this is Tony, and this is Steel Commander. And this is Rick, and they're going to be swimming with us today. Swimming? Where did that come from?
I don't know.
Okay, well, take it away, Steel Commander, and we will see you next time
on the Sabaton History Channel. Thanks for watching. That was awesome, right? So please subscribe to our channel and click that little bell so you get notifications the next time we release another episode of Sabaton History Channel.